The chapter begins with a dark castle looming under the full moon, its towers draped in shadow while bats circle above. Inside the throne hall, the demon lord Farza stands, exuding a terrifying aura as he looks down at the lone warrior before him, Han Jae-woo. Farza acknowledges the human strength, recognizing his skill with a grin before summoning his power, Elector Steel, causing the entire hall to quake. His title flashes in the system interface. Rank 7 Demon Lord, Farza of Würzburg. Han Jae-woo charges forward, his sword radiating with energy. He is determined to end the demon's reign, activating Elector Steel on his own weapon. Focusing his mind, he calls upon the 12th form of the Empirical Sword, ready to deliver the final strike. But before the attack connects, the world freezes. The colors distort. A sudden glitch tears through the scene, followed by a system message. You have been disconnected from the server. Confused, Han Jae-woo tries to move, but the screen fades to black. Farza's laughter echoes as everything dissolves into data fragments. The final message reads, "Quest failed, player, Han Jae-woo." Back in reality, his friends are standing near his gaming capsule. One of them notices he's still inside the game, unsure how to wake him up. The other panics after accidentally unplugging the cable, causing the capsule's lights to flicker out. Han Jae-woo tears off the headset in frustration, his expression filled with disbelief and anger. He shouts at his friend, demanding to know who unplugged the Ethernet cable. When the friend apologizes, Jae-woo erupts. He had been moments away from victory. His breathing slows as he sits back, exhausted. His thoughts begin to narrate his story. He introduces himself as Han Jae-woo, once a popular and successful man, known as Hanum's problem solver, brain, and even money goblin. But all that changed when he discovered a virtual world created by Super AI Aquila, a masterpiece VR game called Savior of Humanity. The massive open-world RPG became his escape and his purpose. For someone who never even read picture books, the game's stories, characters, and world were life-changing. They taught him emotions beyond wealth and competition. Driven by obsession, he borrowed money, 1,000,000,001, to purchase a premium game capsule. To outsiders, it was madness. To him, it was freedom. That illusion shattered when creditors began pounding on his door. They shouted, demanding repayment. Jae-woo, half amused and half defiant, reminded them of their own hidden sins, affairs, workplace scams, and secret obsessions, exposing each with a smirk. But the creditors only grew angrier, pointing out his own reckless behavior, borrowing an enormous sum just to play a game and attempting to pay it back by writing walkthrough guides. As the confrontation ends, Jae-woo's silence says everything, the mix of guilt, regret, and lingering devotion to the only world that ever made him feel alive. Han Jae-woo stands before his creditors, calmly handing them a neatly written guide, a complete walkthrough of the dungeon he had just conquered. It was his way of settling things for now. Once they leave, he checks his remaining credits and savings, realizing how little he has left. One of the creditors encourages him to return to his old job, reminding him of his reputation as Hanum's problem solver. But Jae-woo refuses without hesitation. He tells himself that he still hasn't seen the true ending of Savior of Humanity, the one no player has ever reached. Completing that final path, he believes, is the least he can do to repay the world that taught him so much. When work ends, he dismisses everyone around him, telling them to go home. As he shuts the door, a creditor calls out from outside, reminding him of the unpaid interest. Jae-woo sighs, ignoring the noise, and logs back into the game. The system greets him with its familiar startup sequence. Savior of Humanity, game start. Location, Bayern Cathedral. A status message appears, noting that his death penalty has been suspended for 22 hours. Realizing that the earlier disconnection cost him valuable progress, Jae-woo wonders how he'll earn money now. Suddenly, a young girl appears before him. She introduces herself as Aquila, the game's master and the AI creator of Savior of Humanity. At first, Jae-woo doesn't believe her. She looks far too young to be the mastermind behind such a massive game. But when time suddenly freezes around them, his doubt turns to shock. Aquila explains that it isn't a spell, but a temporary server shutdown. Then she tells him her reason for appearing. A new 7th anniversary event has just begun. A completely new world has opened, and she wants Jae-woo to be the first to clear it with a brand new character. Jae-woo laughs in disbelief. He hasn't even finished the main game, so why start over? Aquila calmly reveals the reward, 25 billion won. The number leaves him speechless. Before he can even process it, Aquila transfers 30 million won directly into his account as a starting bonus. His balance updates instantly, placing him at the top of the leaderboard. She smiles, calling him her VIP. For Jae-woo, the temptation is too great to resist. The reward would cover his debts and his next interest payment. Without hesitation, he accepts. Aquila, satisfied, begins the setup. A bright light appears overhead as a glowing portal forms, a door suspended in the air. She explains that it leads to the new world. Jae-woo jokes about it resembling the Anywhere door from Doraemon, earning a small laugh from her. Before stepping through, he reminds her not to forget about the reward. With determination, he declares that he'll reach the true ending no matter what. Just as he's about to walk through, Aquila casually adds one last detail. If his character dies in this event, he'll die in real life. Before he can react, a powerful shockwave pulls him in. Pain strikes through his body, sharp and real. Confusion and panic set in as he realizes the truth of her words. Despite the shock, Jae-woo grits his teeth and steadies himself. If this is what it takes, he'll face it head-on. He'll see the true ending, whatever it costs. Han Jae-woo stumbled through the dark forest, his throat dry as sandpaper. The game marked him as dehydrated. He cursed Aquila for giving him a weak starter character with only 20 max HP and 3 mana. After only half a day's travel, he was already struggling. He spotted a river and, relieved, remembered survival tips he'd once read. As he approached the water, he suddenly saw a naked woman bathing and, overwhelmed, suffered a nosebleed and lost a point of HP. When an on-screen prompt asked for payment to continue, he was incredulous that a VIP would be charged for DLC in what he thought was a complete edition. A group of women emerged and demanded payment to look further. They forced him to the ground. A leering woman threatened him while his HP began to fall. A man intervened and introduced himself as Rudd, a monster hunter who'd been unlucky enough to wander near the witch's forest while tracking prey. Jae-woo answered in kind, and when Rudd asked how Jae-woo had ended up there, Jae-woo gave the vague reply he'd been practicing in his head. Jae-woo assured Rudd he could handle the situation. After all, he had written a 3-day guide on how to defeat the witches of Havel. The game then displayed the witches' profile. 5 notorious bosses named Gunda, Kaldura, Aldaida, Fugel, and Juju, infamous for killing thousands of players despite being early game obstacles. Jae-woo probed at the witches' rivalries, reminding them of past betrayals. His provocation worked. Fugel and Juju began to turn on one another, and the system registered their shifting motives. The interface also summarized each witch's personality trait. Aldaida as tactically unaware, Gunda as having a large appetite, and Kaldura as eager to fight, giving Jae-woo quick insight into how the group might fracture. A sudden commotion erupts in the forest as the witches begin shouting at one another. Accusations fly, curses echo, and the clearing fills with chaos. Hair is pulled, spells spark in the air, and the witches' alliance dissolves instantly. The system registers the result. Han Jae-woo has successfully provoked all 5 witches of Havel. He grins, pleased that everything is unfolding exactly as planned. While most would think the witches were an organized group because of their shared title, Han knows better. They are powerful but lack any teamwork, and their disunity has cost countless players their lives. Exploiting that weakness was the key to survival. Seizing the opportunity, Han urges Rudd to escape while the witches fight amongst themselves. Rudd, astonished by Jae-woo's quick thinking, agrees. But before leaving, Jae-woo pushes several of the witches into a patch of glue-like substance he had noticed earlier, slowing their movement even more. He points out the exit to Rudd, who rushes ahead as Jae-woo follows with a smug grin, muttering about the easy experience points they drop despite their lack of intelligence. Just as he feels confident, a snake coils tightly around his leg, dragging him to the ground. The system identifies it as Fugel's familiar, restricting his movement. Fugel, wounded but defiant, vows to take him down with her. Jae-woo struggles, realizing too late that his weak character can't overpower the creature. Rud leaps in to help, slashing through the snake with his sword. Once freed, Jae-woo thanks him and asks to borrow his bow. Rud hesitates but eventually hands it over. Jae-woo draws the weapon, recalling his limited experience from a previous playthrough, and takes aim at a fragile glass bottle resting above the witches' heads. The shot lands perfectly, shattering it. The witches panic as they recognize the contents, an acid bomb. The explosion engulfs the clearing in a violent burst, silencing their cries. Debris flies in all directions, and a stray stone strikes Jae-woo's head, costing him a single HP. When the dust settles, Rud asks if they manage to defeat the witches. Jae-woo warns him not to jinx it, but the system soon confirms their victory. 4 of the witches, Hejuju, Fugel, Aldaida, and Gunda, are listed as defeated, rewarding Jae-woo with over 300,000 experience points and 5,000 achievement points. Overjoyed, Jae-woo celebrates his luck. For a low-level player, this was an incredible game. Rud expresses relief, thanking Jae-woo for saving his life and offering a gift in gratitude, rare red dragon fruits taken from the witch's nest. The system recognizes the item's value, granting Jae-woo the title Dragon Bone, who possesses great might. His stats skyrocket, gaining hundreds of points in health, strength, and dexterity. Staring at the rapidly rising numbers, Jae-woo can hardly contain his excitement. For a player who had started so weak, this kind of power was unthinkable. Rud, now more composed, turns to him with curiosity and asks if he would be interested in becoming a monster hunter. The system instantly registers this decision point, unlocking a new route, the relationship path with the monster hunter. Han Jae-woo realizes something crucial. This situation might be an unexpected opportunity. Without a class, all the massive experience points he earned will eventually go to waste. If he doesn't find a way to use them soon, they'll vanish within a month. Determined not to lose such progress, he begins to consider his next step. As Rud prepares to leave, Han suddenly proposes a new idea, asking if 3 months would be enough time. Rud laughs, teasing that 3 years might be more appropriate. The scene shifts to the two moving deeper into the jungle. Rud explains the next step in Han's training. Han is to hide anywhere he wishes within the forest, while Rud will hunt him down after 30 minutes. It's a test of instinct, survival, and strategy. Han quickly understands what's happening. Rud is using a monster tracking skill from the hunter's skill tree. Impressed by how fast Rud adapts, Han still believes he has the advantage. After all, he's explored this forest countless times in past playthroughs. Every poisonous mushroom, deceptive path, and lurking beast is already memorized. With the boost from the red dragon fruit, his physical abilities are nearly at their limit. He's confident Rud won't find him easily. But before long, his overconfidence backfires. As he stops to catch his breath, Rud suddenly appears behind him and greets him casually, leaving Han startled and sitting on the ground in shock. Rud cheerfully assigns him 50 points for effort and even gives 10 bonus points for enthusiasm. When Han asks how he managed to find him, Rud only smiles and tells him that it's been a long time since he's had a student this interesting to teach. The system registers the end of the trial. Han has completed the Hunter's Initiation quest. A new quest, Hunter's Trial, becomes available, and Han officially acquires the Monster Hunter class. Along with it come several new abilities: herbalism, intermediate swordsmanship, survivalism, and musket shooting. Han can't hide his excitement and smirks confidently, while Rud congratulates him and suggests they continue working together. 3 months pass. Rud, amazed by Han's progress, remarks that he's mastered everything already. Han confidently challenges his mentor to hide this time, promising to find him easily. Amused, Rud accepts the challenge, joking that if Han fails to locate him within an hour, he'll be responsible for dinner. Rud sets off to find a hiding spot, climbing a cliff while thinking about how much he's come to admire his apprentice. He decides to make it slightly easier and settles near a cliffside, assuming Han won't find him there. But before long, Han appears again, standing right before him with a mischievous smirk. Rudd is stunned. Memories of their past training flash before his eyes. Every time he tried to hide, Han found him effortlessly, repeating the same confident line. There you are. Rudd can hardly believe it. In just 3 months, Han has mastered skills that took him 5 years to perfect. Even when he hid inside a hellhound's nest, a place most would never dare to enter, Han tracked him down without hesitation, calmly remarking that even earthquakes wouldn't wake a sleeping hellhound. Overwhelmed by shock and admiration, Rudd finally concedes, acknowledging Han's unbelievable growth and skill. Han Jaewoo's training with Rudd reached its conclusion after months of rigorous practice. He had progressed from a lost wanderer in the forest to a skilled hunter who could track, fight, and survive under any condition. Rudd acknowledged his student's growth, impressed by how quickly Jaewoo had mastered skills that normally took years to learn. Jaewoo's progress wasn't ordinary. His immense experience from defeating the witches had allowed him to grow at an unprecedented rate. Rudd, proud of his pupil, praised his effort and talent. Jaewoo, however, knew the real reason behind his quick mastery. He already possessed knowledge from his previous experiences in the same world. While Rudd believed he was teaching Jaewoo new techniques, Jaewoo had actually written many of the survival principles and monster ecology details himself in another life. When Rudd asked what Jaewoo planned to do next, Jaewoo decided it was time to focus on earning money. Rudd then offered him a recommendation to work as a mercenary, introducing him to a trusted friend in the guild. Jaewoo accepted without hesitation, seeing it as the perfect opportunity to gain income, freedom, and possibly meet other powerful figures within the game's world. Rudd gave him his old mercenary badge as a sign of trust, marking Jaewoo's first official step into a new stage of his journey. As Jaewoo prepared to log out, he reflected on how far he had come. From barely surviving in a dangerous forest to mastering combat skills and earning a class, his progress was steady and satisfying. Though he knew the world was full of risks and death could come at any time, that uncertainty only fueled his determination. He resolved to continue forward, determined to reach the true ending and confront Aquila, the one who had placed him in this world. Meanwhile, in the divine realm above, Aquila watched Jaewoo's every move with amusement. She found his cleverness entertaining and was pleased by how much he had advanced. Beside her stood Valfurga, another deity who viewed Jaewoo's journey with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Though Valfurga questioned Aquila's motives, it was clear that Jaewoo had drawn the attention of beings far beyond his understanding. Aquila simply smiled, hinting that Jaewoo was more than just a pawn in her plans. He was a talent worth watching. The gods continued to observe as Jaewoo's story moved toward its next chapter, unaware that their own fates were beginning to intertwine with his. Han Jaewoo forced his aching legs forward, exhausted from the endless trek through the dense forest. His body felt heavy, every step draining what little energy he had left. The rough terrain had taken its toll, but despite his fatigue, he pushed on. The sight ahead gave him a surge of relief. The outpost of the mercenary corps was finally within reach. After reaching the nearby city, he entered a well-known tavern called Francois, a lively place filled with chatter, clinking mugs, and the smell of freshly cooked food. The atmosphere was welcoming, the kind that encouraged conversation, perfect for gathering information. Hans settled into his seat, already forming a plan to find out more about his next lead. He decided to ask about a man named Rebes Chaltz, the contact Rudd had mentioned. However, the moment he spoke the name, the tavern's mood shifted drastically. Conversations died mid-sentence, and the cheerful air was replaced by tension. The maids and patrons grew visibly nervous. One of them, trembling, explained that the name was forbidden, that anyone associated with Chaltz met misfortune. Her frightened tone revealed that he wasn't just dangerous, but infamous. Before Han could process it fully, chaos erupted. Someone bumped into him hard enough to make him stumble. When he looked up, he found himself face-to-face with a tall, muscular man with a confident smirk, the very person he had been asking about. Rebes Chaltz recognized the badge Rudd had given Han and immediately assumed he was Rudd's new recruit. Without giving Han a chance to speak, Chaltz enthusiastically declared that they would be companions, his excitement leaving no room for refusal. Han, caught off guard, could only mutter to himself in disbelief, realizing Rudd had thrown him into yet another troublesome situation. Though frustrated, he decided to play along for now. Soon after, he learned that he was being drawn into a conflict between the Prince-Elector and the forces of Pesamut, a large-scale war with political and divine stakes. Despite his reluctance, Han recognized the value in this new role. The Prince-Elector was not an ordinary figure, but one of the guardians of the game's world. If Han wanted to uncover the truth behind the true ending, this was the kind of opportunity he needed. Before long, a sudden disturbance outside the tavern drew everyone's attention. A grand procession passed through the streets, led by armored soldiers and banners bearing the royal insignia. Chalt watched proudly, saying it was the Prince-Elector's entourage. Han observed from the crowd. At the front of the procession rode the Prince-Elector himself, a man whose cold and commanding presence made him appear more like a villain than a ruler. Then, among the soldiers following him, Han caught sight of someone else, Valfurga, the divine figure he had seen before in Aquila's gun. Han Jaewu's attention drifted as the Prince-Elector spoke. His mind was fixed on Valfurga, standing silently beside the royal figure. When the prince noticed her distraction, she quickly composed herself and assured him that everything was fine, reminding him that the battlefield awaited. Han watched the exchange from afar, feeling a dull ache in his chest. He remembered her from his previous playthroughs. She had been his loyal companion, and no matter what choices he made, every route had ended the same way. She died before the end. This time, he vowed to change that outcome. Even if it cost him his life, he would find a way to reach an ending where she lived. Later, the scene shifted to the mercenary training grounds. Dozens of soldiers were already engaged in fierce sparring sessions, their weapons clashing as dust and sweat filled the air. Chaltz, grinning widely, announced that they were choosing group leaders through duels, with a cash reward on top. Han wasn't thrilled, but decided to stay quiet, thinking it would be wiser to observe for now. That peace didn't last long. Chaltz suddenly called out his name, volunteering him to join the sparring matches. The mercenaries immediately turned their attention toward Han, mocking him as fresh meat and eager to test his strength. Before he could protest, one of them, a muscular fighter named Max, challenged him to a duel. The match began quickly. Max lunged first, confident in his size and power. But in a single, effortless movement, Han countered and knocked him out cold. The crowd fell silent for a moment, stunned by how fast it ended. Then came the murmurs, disbelief, admiration, and excitement. Han's fame within the group began to rise as his unexpected strength became the talk of the camp. One after another, mercenaries lined up to fight him. He defeated each opponent with ease, his training and enhanced power overwhelming them. Even his swordsmanship and binding techniques improved with every clash. However, his growing list of victories only made him more exhausted. Then a towering, bald fighter named Charlotte stepped forward, taunting the others for losing to a newcomer. His sheer size and presence intimidated everyone. Even Han hesitated, wondering if the man was even human. When he instinctively tried to log out, the system wouldn't respond. Panic set in for a brief moment, but he steeled himself and accepted the challenge. The battle began with Charlotte charging first. Han narrowly dodged, grabbed him mid-attack, and slammed him into the ground with a thundering impact. The crowd erupted in shock. Charlotte, known as one of the strongest in the Corps, lay defeated. Han's fame soared again as the others began cheering and shouting in disbelief, calling him a monster with incredible strength hidden beneath his slim frame. Before Han could catch his breath, Chaltz stepped forward, his eyes glowing with excitement. The crowd fell silent as he ordered everyone to move aside. Han braced himself, unsure if this was going to be another fight, but instead, Chaltz declared that Han had proven himself. With a smirk of satisfaction, he announced that Han Jaewu was the new group leader of Valorstad Vathin. Then came the system's final message confirming his achievement. The hidden quest to join the Mercenary Corps had been completed, and a new mission had been unlocked: retake Harfi. The scene shifts to a battlefield where soldiers on both sides prepare for war under the banner of the Prince-Elector's forces. As the horns sound, the clash begins, and chaos spreads across the field with soldiers charging and striking one another. Han Jae-woo recalls the plan taught by Chaltz before the battle began. They were ordered to stand against the orc army led by the demon king Pezamut. Their mission was simple: break through the enemy formation and steal the military flag of the orc commander. Once their main forces created a gap, his group was to slip through and cause the enemy line to collapse. But Chaltz had also warned that orcs were strong and disciplined, known for their tight coordination on the battlefield. Valorstead Valor, as the group leader, was tasked with halting their advance. In the midst of battle, Han Jae-woo moves forward, cutting through orcs, thinking about how he never intended to lead anyone. He only wanted to earn a bit of military merit and escape before things got worse. Yet now, caught in the center of combat, he continues fighting alongside his squad. On the other side, the orc captain realizes his spearmen are falling apart. Angered, he looks through his binoculars and sees the attackers closing in. Immediately, he orders his troops to form ranks and prepare their muskets. Volleys of gunfire erupt, shaking the ground. Despite the pressure, Han Jae-woo and his team push forward through the smoke and noise, taking advantage of the enemy's need to reload between volleys. Their charge breaks the orc formation completely. The captain, stunned to see his soldiers overwhelmed by a small squad, refuses to retreat. He knows the flag they guard represents the pride and history of their tribe, something he cannot allow to be taken. Han Jae-woo's group fights relentlessly, breaking through the last line of defense and seizing the enemy commander's military flag. With the flag in his possession, Han Jae-woo feels a surge of relief, knowing his mission is complete and that the recognition he sought is within reach. But before he can relax, a shout from one of his men reaches him. Their allies are retreating, and orc reinforcements are already approaching from the front. The realization hits him that the victory might be short-lived, and the situation on the battlefield is far from over. The situation turns tense as Han Jae-woo watches allied lines break and retreat. Victory had felt close, but now the front was collapsing and his squad found itself surrounded. Han Jae-woo's mind races. Frustration and disbelief at the sudden reversal mingle with the realization that retreat is no longer an option. An imposing figure appears on the field, Grand General Kalyan, flanked by elite orc soldiers. He offers the attackers a choice: surrender and live, or resist and be cut down, but Han Jae-woo rejects the offer outright, responding with a mocking refusal. The taunt is meant to unnerve Kalyan, but the attempt to intimidate the general fails. The orc ranks steel themselves and prepare to fire. The volley of musket fire drives everyone back. Han Jae-woo thinks through past playthroughs and recognizes the danger. The Grand General's presence changes the scale of the threat, and his current fame and rank are not enough to confront such a foe directly. A sharp memory flashes. Akila's warning that death in the game means death in reality. That knowledge tightens the pressure on every decision. Panic spreads through Han Jae-woo's team as they demand orders. He forces himself to respond, even as others accuse him of losing control. In a desperate, unconventional move, he grabs the trumpet and sounds it toward the wrong sector, not to call reinforcements, but to create a distraction. He orders his men to hold their ground and literally use their shields to block incoming fire while he attempts to buy time. Kalyan commands his spearmen to push forward. The orc assault closes in, and Kalyan himself leads a strike aimed at Han Jae-woo, declaring him the archenemy of their people. At the critical moment, Valfurges intervenes, breaking through to protect Han Jae-woo and rallying the defenders. Valfurges urges the soldiers to raise their swords and press back, buying space and shifting the immediate tide of the confrontation. Kalyan raises his voice across the battlefield, ordering all troops to stand down. He declares that no one is to interfere, as the fight is now a noble duel between himself and the Countess of Niederbamern, Valfurges. Valfurges steps forward with composure and acknowledges Kalyan's challenge, remarking that he is indeed a true man. Their blades clash in the center of the field, and the duel begins. Han Jae-woo watches closely, impressed by the sheer strength on display. Despite Valfurges being in the early stages of her journey, she holds her ground evenly against the orc general. Her swordsmanship is swift and precise, and when the moment presents itself, she delivers a sharp kick to Kalyan's face, forcing him back. Han Jae-woo, watching from a distance, is in awe at how skilled she is, not only in swordplay, but also in close combat. Kalyan, recognizing her technique, deduces that she must belong to the militant sisterhood of Valfurga, which would explain her exceptional ability. Valfurges answers that she serves God with a devoted heart, to which Kalyan responds with a faint, almost respectful tone. As the sun dips lower, Valfurges warns that time is running short and then strikes with blinding speed. Her final blow lands cleanly, cutting through Kalyan's guard. The Grand General staggers, acknowledging the duels end with a quiet acceptance before collapsing. The surrounding orc troops cry out in shock and immediately call for retreat. The battlefield clears as Valfurges stands victorious. Han Jae-woo is stunned. The powerful general who had overwhelmed the moments earlier was defeated in a single strike. He quietly admires Valfurges, fully realizing her strength and grace. After the battle, Valfurges approaches Han Jae-woo. She recognizes his courage during the fight and introduces herself formally. Han Jae-woo introduces himself as Valor Stead Valor, and the two exchange respectful words. The system acknowledges Valfurges' expression of respect toward him. Han Jae-woo admits that without her intervention, his group would have been completely wiped out. Reflecting on the battle, he realizes he has been acting carelessly and is no longer protected by the status he once had. Valfurges notices his somber tone and asks why he hangs his head despite surviving honorably. At that moment, one of his teammates rushes over, handing him the captured flag. The acknowledgement of his leadership boosts his credibility among the mercenary corps. Han Jae-woo looks at the flag, realizing that it now belongs to him, the symbol of his success in the battle. However, his excitement draws strange looks from his comrades, who joke that he must have taken a hit to the head. The scene then transitions to a quieter evening. During dinner, a young boy bursts into the room, calling out for Charlotte and asking if she's hurt after returning from another war. Charlotte, flustered, reassures him that she's fine. Watching the exchange, Han Jae-woo turns to Chaltz and casually asks if the boy is her daughter. Chaltz immediately corrects him, explaining that Charlotte is only 15, leaving Han Jae-woo slightly embarrassed by his assumption. Han Jae-woo immediately doubts Chaltz's explanation and accuses him of lying. Chaltz, keeping calm, clarifies that the young girl isn't Charlotte's daughter, but her younger sister, Baptise. The moment he finishes, Baptise storms toward Han Jae-woo, furious, and demands that he pay for Charlotte's medical expenses, blaming him for her condition. The system briefly indicates that Han Jae-woo is under the effect of confusion, leaving him momentarily speechless. Charlotte tries to stop her sister, insisting that they all survive because of Han Jae-woo's leadership. Baptise is taken aback by her words, but Charlotte continues, explaining that without him, their entire squad would have been wiped out by the orcs. The rest of the group joins in, cheering loudly in agreement and chanting his name over and over. Embarrassed by the sudden praise, Han Jae-woo blushes and awkwardly tells everyone to focus on eating, but the teasing only grows louder as they laugh about their blushing leader. Their celebration is interrupted when Valfurges enters the room and calls out Han Jae-woo's full name. Everyone immediately goes silent, shocked to see the Countess herself appear before them. The scene then transitions to the Harfium forward base. Han Jae-woo rides alongside Valfurges on horseback. She informs him that the Elector himself has summoned him, intending to reward him for his achievements. She expresses genuine excitement, calling it the greatest honor a mercenary could receive. Han Jae-woo notes internally that this version of Valfurges seems more cheerful than the one he remembers. He remarks that she appears happier than he does, and she warmly tells him to call her Valfurges, not by title. He awkwardly agrees, though he still adds Dame, out of habit. As they ride, Valfurges points toward the soldiers ahead, the same ones saved through his efforts during the last battle. She reminds him that their survival is because of his bravery, telling him that their lives are reason enough to feel proud. Han Jae-woo reflects silently, realizing that Valfurges herself hasn't changed at all, only his position has. He's no longer her equal, but just another mercenary under command. They arrive before the Elector, where Valfurges formally introduces Han Jae-woo. The Elector greets him, introducing himself as Philip the Elector steel. His aura carries immense weight, and Han Jae-woo can feel the power radiating from him, leaving him momentarily breathless. The Elector acknowledges Han Jae-woo's courage, calling him the Reaper of the Field, and commends his bravery. He declares that such valor deserves reward and grants 100 florins to the soldiers under his command and 300 florins to Han Jae-woo himself. The system reflects the update in his gold balance. Han Jae-woo kneels and promises to repay the Elector's generosity. The Elector then asks if he has any other requests, to which Han Jae-woo hesitates before asking for permission to regroup with his comrades and rest at Weitenbear. The Elector agrees, granting him a wagon from the supply lines for travel. As Han Jae-woo expresses his gratitude, the Elector notices his hesitation and asks if there's something more on his mind. Han Jae-woo, thinking that he should normally end the conversation there, decides instead to speak up and asks a direct question: what are his thoughts on this war? Han Jae-woo could immediately tell that everyone around him was unsettled by what just happened. He quietly thought to himself that it was expected. After all, he was still just a lowly mercenary, far from being someone of importance among nobles. The Elector then turned to him and asked for his opinion on the situation. With calm composure, Han Jae-woo replied that, from his limited perspective, he couldn't see the entire picture yet, but there was one thing that troubled him. His words immediately drew laughter from one of the Elector's men, who mocked him, saying he wasn't qualified to give advice to someone of the Elector's stature just because he had achieved a single military merit. Another joined in, claiming that Han Jae-woo must have picked up scraps of information somewhere and was pretending to know more than he did. Before the ridicule could continue, Valfurgis stepped forward. She reminded the Elector of an old saying, that even when crossing a stone bridge, one should tap it first, and suggested that he at least hear Han Jae-woo out. Her words silenced the crowd, though one of the men still lashed out, furious that someone would dare speak out of turn before the Elector. Another quickly intervened, revealing that she was the niece of the Elector of Bayern, which made even the critics hesitate. Han Jae-woo quietly noted that Valfurgis' influence was as strong as ever. Even the Steel Elector himself couldn't simply dismiss her. The Elector finally relented and told Han Jae-woo to continue. Han Jae-woo warned that an ambush was incoming. His statement drew shocked reactions from everyone present, and the Elector, narrowing his eyes, asked if he had any basis for such a claim. Han Jae-woo explained that the Demon King Pezamut's past strategies had always involved ambushes and betrayals. Recalling the war against the Kingdom of Toa 10 years ago and the battle with Margrave Anhalt 6 years ago, he pointed out that in both cases, Pezamut's ambush tactics had been decisive. With that in mind, he added that they shouldn't overlook the possibility of internal betrayal either. The Elector's gaze hardened as he asked whether Han Jae-woo was implying that a traitor might be among them. Han Jae-woo calmly clarified that he was merely suggesting it as a possibility and that caution would do no harm. In response, the Elector's expression darkened and his powerful aura filled the room. He warned Han Jae-woo that the only reason his head was still attached to his body was because he allowed it and ordered him to remember his place. Han Jae-woo bowed and apologized, saying he hadn't meant to overstep, then took his leave. As he walked away, his mind raced. He found the Elector's attitude suspicious. In his previous runs, the Steel Elector had always been a cautious and rational man. This time, however, he seemed unusually arrogant and impatient. Han Jae-woo couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The timeline itself seemed to be diverging. The red dragon fruits had appeared earlier than they should have, and Valfurgis had shown up much sooner than expected. Everything about this run felt different from his countless previous attempts. He began to wonder what could be causing these changes. While he was deep in thought, Valfurgis came running after him, slightly out of breath. She called out to him, addressing him as Sir Valor, saying she had finally caught up to him. Han Jae-woo stopped and turned to face her, greeting her in surprise. She remarked that he certainly moved fast, still catching her breath as she spoke. Han Jae-woo, slightly out of breath, asked Valfurgis if she had run all the way there because she was worried about him. Without hesitation, she answered that of course she had. The sincerity in her voice made him momentarily flustered, and he couldn't help but think to himself how unexpectedly adorable she was. Valferges then apologized on behalf of Elector Philip for his earlier words and behavior. She told Han Jae-woo that if there was anything he wanted, she would make it happen, whatever he desired. He froze for a moment, his mind immediately wandering toward less noble thoughts. The idea of whatever he wanted echoed in his head, and he imagined teasing her about it, asking what she would do if he requested something outrageous. In his imagination, Valferges proudly declared that she could handle anything, reminding him that she came from one of the wealthiest, noble families in the empire. When he jokingly mentioned money and clothes, she seemed completely unfazed. Snapping back to reality, Han Jae-woo composed himself and requested only a writing quill and a pistol. Valferges looked surprised, asking if that was truly all he wanted, pointing out that this was a rare opportunity to ask for something grander. But Han Jae-woo simply smiled and insisted that it was fine. He explained that his dream was to become a cavalryman, and that he wanted to use this chance to learn horseback riding. As for the pistol, it was something he had always longed to own. Though he spoke in a slightly dramatic way, there was genuine emotion behind his words, even as tears welled in his eyes. Valferges tilted her head in confusion, asking why he was crying, and he replied that they were a man's tears. She watched him for a moment, visibly touched, and admitted that she had never seen someone so unselfish before. Han Jae-woo thought quietly to himself that he had indeed given up quite a lot. Embarrassed, Valferges' cheeks turned red, and she quickly said that it wasn't the place for such talk. Before she could say more, Han Jae-woo grabbed her by the hand and led her along, his eyes lighting up when he looked at her. Sometime later, the war to reclaim Harfium Hill began. Elector Philip, standing at the front lines, faced off against the demon king Pezimut. Philip declared boldly that the day had come for Pezimut to die, while the enemy commander sighed in annoyance, complaining about hearing his voice from afar. A servant approached Pezimut to report that preparations for war were complete. Pezimut commended the servant for his efficiency, but the man hesitated and nervously asked if his lord truly intended to use the Hexax woman. Pezimut snapped, irritated at having the matter brought up again. The servant, clearly frightened, argued that the woman was far too cruel, warning that if they captured the elector alive, she might ruin their chance to use him as a hostage. Pezimut brushed it off, insisting that he could handle her himself, and told the servant to trust him. As if summoned by their conversation, a chilling voice echoed behind them. It was the woman herself, announcing her presence in a playful yet unsettling tone, saying she was ready to go. Pezimut stiffened slightly and told her to stay sharp, to which she replied cheerfully, almost sing-song in her response. Hesitantly, Pezimut added a warning, asking her to go easy this time. She turned her head with a mischievous grin, pretending not to understand, asking when she had ever gone too far. Pezimut, exasperated, shot back that she always went too far. She only giggled in response, claiming she always took it easy. Everyone around them started sweating nervously, exchanging glances as if silently thinking the same thing. Hearing her say that she always took it easy was the most terrifying part of all. Han Jae-woo rode swiftly through the dense forest, the wind brushing past his face as he gripped the reins tighter. He marveled at the horse beneath him, amazed by its strength and speed. It wasn't just any horse. The name Philpy suited it perfectly. To think this was merely a spare mount was beyond belief. It was clearly the kind of steed that belonged to someone of high status, like the Lady of House Byron. He also recalled the potion Valferges had given him, a perfect healing potion, capable of completely restoring any wound. The thought of its worth made him nearly choke. 1,000 florins per bottle, the equivalent of an entire building. He couldn't help but think that such generosity from her was more than he deserved. Just as he was lost in thought, a sudden explosion thundered from behind him, shaking the ground. Turning his head, he realized the battle had already begun. Panic flickered across his face. He urged the horse faster, knowing he had to hurry. He thought grimly about the elector. Even someone as powerful as Steel Philip couldn't manage a war like this alone. If he charged recklessly as he often did, he would walk straight into disaster. Worse yet, Han Jae-woo feared the possibility that betrayal was already in motion. On the battlefield, the chaos was in full swing. Elector Philip shouted at the man standing across from him, his own uncle. His voice trembled with anger and disbelief as he demanded to know how his uncle could betray him and still call himself a knight of the Empire. The uncle sneered, unmoved by the accusation. He told Philip that the truth was simple. Philip had conspired against the Emperor, and he, as a loyal servant of the Empire, was merely helping Pezimut to arrest him for treason. His words were laced with arrogance, as if he enjoyed watching the confusion spread across Philip's face. Philip, enraged, called it nonsense, refusing to accept such lies. But Pezimut, standing nearby, mocked him coldly. He stepped toward the elector with a twisted grin, comparing him to a delusional child. Pezimut ordered his men to tie Philip up, and several soldiers moved in immediately. Panic filled Philip's eyes as he backed away, shouting that they had no right, that he was an elector of the Empire. Pezimut rolled his eyes and told his men to silence him. Before they could reach him, a blur of motion appeared Valfurgis. She launched a swift kick that struck Pezimut across the face, sending him staggering back. Pezimut cursed loudly, clutching his cheek, while Valfurgis shouted for the soldiers to take the opportunity and get Philip out of there. They quickly obeyed, supporting the wounded elector as they retreated. Pezimut's uncle turned in panic, yelling that Philip was escaping, urging Pezimut to act. Pezimut snapped in irritation, shouting for silence as the noise around him built up. He turned to Hexax, the eerie woman standing nearby, and ordered her to go after them. Hexax tilted her head with a teasing tone, asking if they had already fled. Hexax gave a sly smirk, stretching lazily as if she had all the time in the world. She casually admitted that she had just been playing around a little. Meanwhile, Han Jae-woo was still cutting through the jungle on horseback when he caught sight of the first of those creatures. The stench hit him before the sight did, rotting flesh clinging to bones, with glowing eyes that burned with hunger. Recognizing the tactic immediately, Han's thoughts turned sharp. He knew Hexax's fighting style well. She would send her zombie dogs first to exhaust her prey, slowly wearing them down before delivering the killing blow herself. To him, it was a revolting but effective strategy. As more of the creatures lunged out from the underbrush, Han raised his voice, shouting into the forest as if Hexax herself could hear him. He declared that he knew her methods, that the few beasts before him meant the bulk of her army must have been sent after Philip. He clenched his teeth and thought bitterly that Philip's fate didn't matter to him. What truly concerned him was Valfurgis. With a sharp pull on the reins, he urged his horse faster, disappearing deeper into the forest. Elsewhere, Elector Steel Philip rode hard through the same jungle, his breathing uneven as he tried to focus his mana. The effort only made things worse. Pezimut's earlier trick had thrown his control completely off balance. Frustration filled him as he cursed under his breath, realizing how dirty the enemy's tactics truly were. Suddenly, one of the zombie dogs leapt from the shadows, its fangs bared. Before it could reach him, Valfurgis intercepted it, striking it down with a precise blow. She turned to him quickly, asking if he was hurt. Philip managed a shaking nod, claiming he was fine. Valfurgis cautioned him that the area they were in was largely uncharted, a place where humans rarely ventured. She warned him to stay alert, and Philip hastily agreed. But even as she spoke, screams erupted behind them. One of their soldiers had been caught by the zombie dogs, begging desperately for help before his voice faded into painful gasps. Valfurgis tried to rush to his aid, but Philip shouted for her to stop. He told her to leave the man behind. She turned to him in disbelief, struggling to comprehend what he had just said. Philip's voice rose as he justified himself. Their lives, he claimed, were of far greater importance than that of an ordinary soldier. Valfurgis froze, disappointment and anger mixing in her eyes. She could hardly recognize the man she was protecting. In her mind, she questioned what the true duty of a noble was supposed to mean. She thought of valor, of the warnings he had given earlier, the advice they all ignored. Had they listened, they might not have been in this desperate situation. Before she could act, a chilling voice came from behind them. Hexax had arrived, laughing darkly as she mocked the group. She found their desperation amusing, like a performance meant only for her. Philip's fear overwhelmed him. In a sudden act of cowardice, he pushed Valfurges toward Hexax, using her as a shield to save himself. The betrayal left her speechless for a moment, then filled with cold fury. As she steadied herself, glaring at the chaos around her, she muttered that they were doomed with someone like him leading them, a supposed elector who abandoned his own in fear. Hexax, still smiling, approached her and whispered that she was wrong. According to her, that kind of selfish strength was exactly what made someone fit to be an elector. Then, with a twisted grin, she turned her gaze to someone unseen and added softly, "Right, sister." Valfurges shouted furiously, demanding Hexax take back her words. She explained that the title of Prince Elector was a crucial position, one that held the power to choose the emperor of the empire. Each elector governed their own territory, practically as sovereign rulers, and such a role was not something to be taken lightly. Hexax, ignoring her outrage, turned to her servants and ordered them to continue tracking down Philip. They immediately obeyed her command. She then turned her attention back to Valfurges, smirking as she pointed out that Valfurges was of Prince Elector blood as well, mocking her for being caught in this situation. Valfurges prepared to strike back, her sword raised in anger, but Hexax dodged with ease and countered, landing a hit while laughing wildly. She seemed to enjoy Valfurges' pain, laughing even louder as she said the sound of her screams only made her want to torment her further. Valfurges, barely holding her ground, thought back to Valor. She believed that if it were him, he would surely find a way to survive this hopeless situation. But for her, she felt this was the end. Hexax, still grinning, said it wasn't over yet. But before she could continue, a sudden gunshot echoed through the air. Confused, she turned to see that one of her zombie dogs had been shot dead. Han Jae-woo appeared from behind, attacking Hexax. Valfurges' eyes filled with tears as she looked at him, recognizing him as Valor. Overwhelmed with emotion, she whispered that he truly was a hero. Han Jae-woo quickly reached her and pulled Valfurges away from danger. Hexax, surprised by how quietly he had moved, realized he had killed the zombie dog and slipped behind her without her even noticing. She thought to herself that he wasn't an ordinary man. Han Jae-woo faced her directly, coldly remarking that she hadn't changed one bit. Hexax smirked, calling him bro, but he raised his gun to her face and told her not to call him that, saying her face disgusted him. Hexax chuckled and commented on his gun, admitting it had a longer range than her weapon, but warning that her whip was faster than reloading bullets. As she said this, she moved swiftly, dodging the bullet he fired and closing the distance between them. She lashed out and struck him hard on the head, shouting that it wasn't over yet. Despite the hit, Han Jae-woo rushed toward her again, closing in rapidly while Hexax taunted him, asking if he was trying to fight her at close range. Hexax was stunned as she tried to process what had just happened. She couldn't believe that someone could completely evade her whip attacks. Even among her entire unit, her whip skills had been considered top tier, yet Han Jae-woo had managed to dodge every strike and close the distance between them in an instant. Realizing the danger, Hexax shouted that she wouldn't just let him shoot, but before she could react further, Han Jae-woo appeared right behind her with a smirk. He struck swiftly with his dagger, catching her completely off guard. She felt the sting of the blade and heard him teasingly remark about the sharpness of his attack, calling himself a burst DPS at heart. Hexax cursed to herself, realizing she had been so focused on the gunfight that she had lost one of her eyes in the process. She needed time to recover, so she decided to retreat. As she tried to flee, she made an excuse about being busy and needing to go, but Han Jae-woo taunted her for running away. She snapped back, saying that taunting wouldn't work on her because she didn't engage in close-range combat. Han Jae-woo, still calm, pointed his gun at her. I said that today. He was playing the role of a long-range fighter. Hexax tried to laugh it off, claiming that she could easily dodge bullets in the air. However, her damaged eye had completely thrown off her sense of distance. Before she could react properly, she realized something was wrong. Her perception was failing her. In the next moment, a bullet hit her square in the stomach. Han Jae-woo lowered his gun slightly, muttering that shooting her felt oddly satisfying, comparing it to taking down a bat with a gun. Hexax collapsed to the ground, injured and unable to move. Standing over her, Han Jae-woo sighed, calling her a real pain and deciding to check what loot she would drop. As he was about to finish things, Hexax tried to act seductive, asking if he was really going to kill her. He simply smirked, gave her the middle finger, and told her to stop pretending before coldly telling her to die like a dog. Hexax groaned in pain before going still. A notification appeared confirming her defeat. Hexax, the Whip of Destruction, and an executive of the Demon King's faction, had been slain. Her dropped items included her cloak, whip, a magic binding rope, a body enhancement potion, venom poison, the venom dragon Ferguma's antidote, and 2,000 florins. Han Jae-woo gathered everything carefully, relieved that he hadn't sold off the potion earlier. He muttered that it was time to move before things got worse. Pulling out the perfect healing potion, he thought to himself that he would definitely save Valferges no matter what. Han Jae-woo examines the potion in his hand, realizing it's a perfect recovery potion. It's described as something that completely heals all wounds and illnesses, but with a caution to apply it directly to the affected area. As he reads this, he understands that it's meant to be used under the armor and directly on the body. Embarrassed by the thought, he briefly loses composure, reminding himself it's a medical procedure, and tries to calm down, insisting to himself that there's nothing indecent about it. The story then shifts to his past in real life. Han Jae-woo recalls that his real name is Han Jae-woo. His father had passed away from an illness when he was young, and his mother later collapsed from overwork, leaving him completely alone at the age of 18. Years later, he's seen working as a fixer in Hanam-do, taking jobs for money. During one of his encounters, someone complains about his behavior, but he dismisses it and reminds them that even he worked for money. His title appears briefly as a fixer named Han Jae-woo, age 22. In another situation, a man expresses gratitude and hands him some money, but Han Jae-woo advises him to use that money to pay off his debts first. The man nervously laughs and claims he has an upcoming quest that could earn him around 10 million won. Curious, Han Jae-woo asks about it, and the man explains that it's from a game called Guardian of Humanity. He describes the game as a massive open world with full freedom, detailed character designs, and over 1 billion users worldwide. He explains that top players earn millions, and that his current quest could bring a huge reward. Han Jae-woo listens, skeptical but intrigued, and when invited to try the game, he declines at first, saying he's busy. However, when his meeting later gets canceled, he decides to log in out of curiosity. Once inside the game, he's amazed by how realistic everything feels. The sky, the people, and the streets all look and move like real life. He touches a vendor out of curiosity, but the vendor scolds him for not having money. Checking his balance, he finds he only has 10 florins, the in-game currency. Deciding to save it, he apologizes to the vendor, but then notices a kid looking longingly at some apples. Seeing that, he buys 1 apple for a single florin and hands it to the child. The mother thanks him, touched by his kindness. Though he thinks to himself that it's not much, he's quietly glad to have helped. As the kid happily thanks him again, Jae-woo tells the child to listen to his mother, ending the moment on a simple, gentle note. Han Jae-woo looks at his surroundings, feeling a quiet wave of nostalgia. Memories of his childhood come back, times when he lived with his mother and constantly begged her for fried chicken. The atmosphere of the game makes him smile faintly. It feels oddly comforting. Over time, he starts logging into Guardian of Humanity more often. Whenever real life feels heavy and stressful, the game becomes his escape. It helps him unwind and recharge before facing the real world again. This cycle continues until he realizes that, in-game, nearly 5 years have passed. One day, while wandering through the game, a woman approaches him. She introduces herself as Valferges and mentions hearing about his skills. She asks if he'd join her to hunt the rampaging boars in Havel Forest. Jae-woo, though surprised, agrees without hesitation. The two head out together, and when he swiftly takes down a large boar in 1 clean strike, Valferges is impressed by his strength. After the hunt, she suggests they form a party. Jae-woo jokes lightly about being the only one who does all the work, but Valferges finds his attitude amusing and promises to recommend him as a knight of the Empire. He accepts with a grin, eager to see where it leads. Time passes, and Jae-woo earns fame and respect within the game. He becomes known as Elector Steel, a hero celebrated by the people he helps save. During a grand ceremony, crowds chant his name. Valfergie stands beside him, proud of how far he's come. She reminds him that the peace and loyalty he sees around them are the results of his own actions, though he humbly insists it wouldn't have been possible without her encouragement that day. In a quieter moment afterward, Valfergie expresses admiration for his dedication and asks what drives him. Jae-woo, brushing a few strands of hair from his face, simply says it's because he loves this world so much. She laughs softly, touched by his sincerity. As they continue traveling together, he mentions how beautiful the sky looks in this world, even joking that aside from a small ache in his face, everything feels perfect. Valfergie's, flustered, tells him he shouldn't have removed her armor earlier, but he calmly replies that it was unavoidable. She reminds him they'll soon arrive at the Valperga convent, and that she intends to repay his kindness once they return. He teasingly asks what kind of reward he might expect, making her fluster again. When they reach the convent, however, they're stopped by a nun named Angela, who explains that the convent is under emergency lockdown. Despite Valfergie's insistence that Jae-woo is an honored guest, the rules remain firm. He isn't allowed to enter. The scene moves to an inn near Reinfelden, where Han Jae-woo lies on a bed, lost in thought. Things have gotten complicated, and he reflects on his original plan to obtain the heart of the angel from the convent. It's an artifact that's been passed down through generations within the Valperga convent, a sacred S-rank item filled with the blessing of a goddess. The relic holds the power to restore its user's soul, essentially granting another life. For Jae-woo, it's something he considers absolutely essential, especially for the events he's preparing for. While he's deep in thought, Valfergie visits his room. She enters politely, apologizing for having him stay in such a modest and despite his status as an honored guest. Noticing his serious expression, she asks what he's doing, and he replies that he's simply thinking. Valfergie hesitates for a moment before lowering her voice, explaining that what she's about to say is confidential. Jae-woo assures her that he'll keep her words secret for life. Trusting him, she reveals that the High Abyss has fallen to darkness. Surprised, Jae-woo mentions that he just met Abbess Angela, but Valfergie quickly corrects him. Angela is the Deputy Abbess, while the true High Abbess is Lady Margarita. Realizing the situation, he's taken aback, suspecting that there must be a traitor within the convent. His thoughts race as he processes the news. Margarita, the legendary abbess, is still alive, a woman of unmatched martial skill, powerful enough to subdue even lesser demon kings. She's the one who transformed the Valperga convent into a formidable military force. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Jae-woo leaps from his bed, determined to act. Valfergie, startled by his sudden movement, asks what's wrong, and he declares that they need to move quickly to save the abbess. He insists that he understands the nature of darkness better than anyone. The scene shifts back to the Valperga convent, where Angela reacts sharply upon hearing that Jae-woo claims to know about darkness. Valfergie defends him, saying that he's someone worthy of trust and that they should believe in him at least this once. Angela, however, remains stern and skeptical. She reminds Valfergie that the current crisis was caused by a traitor and refuses to place faith in an outsider. Her tone hardens as she orders that Jae-woo be escorted out immediately, filling the room with tense silence. Angela reacts angrily when Han Jae-woo claims knowledge of the Seven Demons Gospel, a forbidden book attributed to Saint Antonio that documents darkness and the sealed demon kings. Once Han Jae-woo confirms familiarity with the text and his methods for opposing darkness, Angela reluctantly accepts his help but forces a strict vow of secrecy, threatening severe consequences if he speaks of it. Despite the tense atmosphere and the stern reception from the convent's leaders, Valfergie steadies Han Jae-woo, and they move to the High Abbess's chamber. As they approach the sealed gate, overwhelming demonic energy becomes apparent. The environment harms protective mantles and causes visible corruption in the afflicted. Valfergie's blessing keeps her mind steady. Han Jae-woo finds himself unusually unaffected as well, giving him a clear head to assess the situation. The high abyss shows signs of rapid consumption by darkness. Black veins spreading up her neck indicate an accelerated corruption rate typical of a priestess under this influence. Manhwa examines her and proposes a straightforward remedy. Apply the convent's holy relic directly to the high abyss to counteract the darkness and stabilize her condition. The convent debates a risky procedure to save the high abyss Margarita, who is consumed by darkness. The proposed plan is to transfer the curse from Margarita into another person and then use the convent's sacred relic to stabilize or revive the original host. The Heart of the Angel is an S-rank artifact held by the Valperga convent. It carries a goddess's blessing and can restore soul, effectively granting another life. Angela, the deputy abbess, objects. She explains that Margarita herself ordered that no one else should be sacrificed on her behalf, and she warns that the curse is incomprehensible and likely fatal to clerics. She stresses that divine power and curses oppose one another, and that transferring the curse could still lead to the High Abbess's death unless handled correctly. Valfergi supports caution, but Han Jae-woo insists he is the best candidate. He is not a cleric, he has studied the Seven Demons Gospel, and his outsider status makes him less vulnerable to the particular effects of the darkness. Under strict conditions of secrecy, and after Angela's reluctant consent, Han Jae-woo agrees to take the curse. He puts on the protective ring and prepares for the ritual. The convent begins the rite and darkness engulfs him. His consciousness is drawn into a black realm, the realm of darkness. In that place, a powerful voice manifests, claiming to be a crouching, grave-dwelling entity and demanding to know who summoned it. Han Jae-woo asserts his identity and demands the curse be lifted from Margarita and transferred to him. The voice resists, threatening to extract souls from anyone near Han Jae-woo if he does not cooperate. Han Jae-woo counters by invoking his knowledge of the Seven Demons Gospel and boasting about having obtained it through a dubious trade, using mockery and insults to force the entity's hand. The tactic works. The entity agrees to grant Han Jae-woo's request, but imposes a condition. A quest is imposed as the price. Han Jae-woo must kill the demon kings who have allied with or are backed by Thrashing Death. The revealed list includes several named demon kings and their attributes. Among those specified are Kulik, 5th in rank, demon king of Nihility, Farza, Herzamuk, and Amor. The condition effectively links Han Jae-woo's success in saving Margarita to a large, multi-target mission against high-ranking demon lords. After the negotiation with the Dark Entity, Han Jae-woo realizes that his bluff is working and the being has taken the bait. He prepares to push his advantage, intending to manipulate it further. He tries to appear humble and cautious, implying that the situation might be too much for someone like him to handle. The dark being reacts arrogantly, calling him weak but still deciding to grant him power. It releases a massive surge of dark energy toward him, an aura filled with destructive force. As the energy engulfs him, Han Jae-woo immediately senses its intensity and realizes it might kill him. He protests that this wasn't part of their deal, but the being coldly responds that nothing in the world comes for free. Power always comes at a price. Before Han Jae-woo can say anything else, the overwhelming energy fully surrounds him, cutting off his voice and consuming him entirely. The system records the results of the ritual. He acquires the title Cold-Blooded One, with drastically increased stats in health and mana, and an entirely new stat called Darkness. He gains an S-rank skill, Undead Summon. However, the last notification declares that he has died. Han Jae-woo momentarily believes he's dead, but then wakes up lying on a bed. Confused, he checks himself and realizes he's alive. He starts laughing in relief, overwhelmed by what just happened. He understands now that he has become something new, a necromancer capable of commanding liches, undead soldiers, and even death dragons. His new title, the Cold-Blooded One, signifies his transformation. He believes that among all 1 billion players in Guardian of Humanity, he has now become number one, finally achieving the recognition he always sought. While he's caught up in his excitement, Valferges enters the room, her eyes red from crying. She explains that after the ritual, he had lost consciousness, so she brought him to her quarters to recover. Han Jae-woo thanks her, flustered by her concern, but she scolds him, telling him never to do something so reckless again. Her voice shows genuine worry, which makes him soften his tone and promise that he won't repeat such an act. Both of them grow shy and awkward as the atmosphere becomes unexpectedly gentle between them. The scene then shifts suddenly to noise and movement outside, where people are running and shouting. The convent seems to be in commotion. Someone wonders aloud if a war has broken out, but it's quickly clarified that it's something else entirely. Han Jae-woo steps outside, confused by the chaos, and asks what's happening. Angela appears and greets him calmly, noting that he's awake. He looks around and notices something unexpected, then freezes in shock. Before he can process it, Angela explains that she had been lying down for so long and simply wanted to stretch a bit, but the cause of his shock becomes clear a moment later. From the direction of a large tree, a cheerful female voice calls out to him. It introduces itself as the High Abbess of the Valperga Convent, Margarita, who now seems to have awakened after being freed from the curse. She addresses him warmly, asking him to call her Mari, marking her return and the success of the ritual.